It's rough out there. I know a lot of you listening are yoga teachers, and most of you are probably having to work other kinds of jobs to make ends meet. Those of you who are actually able to string it together, I'm sure it's a hell of a grind. And when we get to those places where it gets hard, where it feels like we're fumbling, what do? Where do we go for support? We don't always have places we can go to talk to people who are in similar situations and dealing with the same kinds of things. But fortunately, there are little pockets out there where we can come together, and one of those is my weekly teachers class. We were talking about this today, and we were talking about how when we get to these places where we're fumbling, the most reliable thing we can do is to go inwards and find a sense of purpose there. Because that sense of internal purpose is what gives us a direction to go in. So if you're listening to this and you'd like to have other people to talk with and to get support from, then I want to invite you to join us. It's my weekly teachers class. And if you're someone who's been thinking about it but haven't done it yet, let me remind everyone that the introductory rate is going to expire at the end of this month. So starting November 1st, it's going to go up just a little bit. It's still incredibly low priced, but if you subscribe by the end of the month, you can lock in the introductory rate indefinitely. So check it out. It's the J. Brown Yoga Weekly Teachers Class. You can find it at jbrownyoga.com. All right, we're back. How about that? This is J. Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is J. Brown. If you're new, let me welcome you. If you're a returning friend, what's up, everyone? How's it going with you this week? Good morning to you. If it's morning, I know a lot of you like to listen to this on Monday morning, right when it posts. At least that's what you tell me in your emails. But podcasts do exist in an asynchronous universe, so it might not be morning for you. So whatever time of the day it might be that this is reaching you, I hope it finds you well. Me, I'm doing okay, all things considered. I got a lot of balls in the air, and I'm just trying not to drop any. Which reminds me, once I was talking about that in a class, must have been a couple of years ago. And I was saying something about, keeping the balls in the air and not dropping them. And someone in the class happened to be a professional juggler. And he said, there's a very ancient juggler adage, a bit of juggler Zen wisdom that says, let the balls drop. I always remember that, because sometimes if you're straining and struggling to keep all the balls in the air, sometimes you just let the balls drop. And to me, that doesn't actually mean not fulfilling my responsibilities. It's more about a sensibility. It's about how I am in my thoughts and in my mind as I'm managing the day-to-day challenges that are presented. And can I go about them in a way that is both strong but receptive? Right? You guys know what I'm talking about. One thing that was really helpful to me this week is I went roller skating. And I believe that I mentioned roller skating once before on the podcast. It is the last time I went roller skating before I went this week. And I just really love roller skating. I think there was a period of time in my childhood where there was a roller skating rink and I used to go, and something about the loud music and the way that I'm rolling and the way the wind hits my face and just the smoothness. And my daughter had this fundraising event for her school, so the whole family, we all went roller skating at this rink, and I just loved it. And my daughter was embarrassed because I was like dancing and having fun. And like, I actually can roller skate really well. I didn't even remember that. But like a lot of people have trouble roller skating. But because of this time in my childhood, I'm very comfortable on the skates. And I think after all these years of yoga practice to then be on them again, I found this fluidity and, oh gosh, just little thing like that, couple of hours of roller skating. Not only that, like my hip feels kind of better. And I was worried because it was kind of hurting some after. And I was like, oh shit, did I really strain myself roller skating? And now I got to teach a workshop this weekend. I'm going to be in pain. Was that really smart? But you know what? I woke up the next day feeling pretty darn good. Like it actually was kind of a good thing. And I just think it's because I was having so much joy while I was doing it. So I don't know if that means anything to anybody or why I'm even telling you that. Maybe there's little things that you might find that you could do for a couple of hours in your week that would, I don't know, balance out all this other kind of crappy stuff. I mean, I know I've said that too before, and I don't really want to get into politics. We've got this election coming up, and I'd be lying if I didn't admit I've got some anxiety about that. If this one goes anything like the last one went, I'm not. So, where I can find the joy is how I'm keeping that mind frame of just letting the balls drop, and I find that is really helping me manage. So, there that is. Now, let me say, I got a lot of emails from you, the listeners, this week. A lot of them mostly from yoga therapists who've been listening to the last few episodes and felt compelled to help me with this problem they feel that I'm having distinguishing between yoga therapy and yoga. And I very much appreciate all of the context, and please feel welcome to keep sending them. But let me just say, I don't really have a problem. I just think that there is a problem with the way that people are trying to distinguish between these things. I get the basic idea. I understand what everybody's saying. I understand this idea that there's some model for analyzing imbalances in someone. And then there's a way of correcting those imbalances, and that these models for analyzing imbalances and correcting imbalances are not generally taught in your standard 200-hour yoga teacher training. And sometimes nowadays, they are being taught in what people are calling yoga therapy programs. So I get that. I get that there's something distinguishing between what yoga therapy teacher trainings or yoga therapy trainings are doing and what yoga teacher trainings are doing currently. But that process of analyzing imbalances and being able to address them, because I don't exactly know how someone corrects imbalances, but I do think you can address imbalances and be more balanced. Well, that process is the process of learning yoga. So I don't really feel comfortable when that process of being able to observe imbalances and address them becomes this special knowledge that people learn when they go to yoga therapy teacher training programs, that then they wield to the people who come work with them for way more money or whatever. I just feel like that is the process of yoga. And if we make it yoga therapy, this process of being able to observe imbalances and address them, then what we do is we kind of cede the territory of yoga over to fitness. Basically, you're saying in yoga, you don't necessarily analyze and address imbalances. You just do poses, and maybe you develop some kind of disciplines or skills, or maybe there's some kind of things that you do in yoga, but it's not yoga therapy. It's not where you really analyze and address imbalances. And I'm saying, no, that's what yoga is. Yoga is me being able to observe my own imbalances and address them. And yes, very often we need help. We can't do it all by ourselves. And having somebody else who's been doing it with themselves and has more experience and has worked with lots of people who do that same kind of process of practice, they can be very helpful. That's what yoga teachers are. They help us. They help us in this process of learning how to address our imbalances. And all the yoga therapists I've talked to say that. I don't cure anyone. I facilitate them doing it for themselves. Exactly. The process of learning yoga. The process of someone developing their own individual yoga. So I'm just saying I don't think we need to create any more new hierarchies. Haven't we learned that yet? And this idea of biopsychosocial spiritual, like I was talking about last week with Shelley. I don't know. To me, that means not having a hierarchy, finding this more horizontal playing field, for us to work within. So, for whatever that's worth, I do always appreciate everybody who listens and writes in, even if you don't agree with me on stuff. In fact, I think that's some of the best learning that happens. So keep it coming. I will continue these conversations going forward. I've already got some people who've reached out to me, so we will pick up the thread again in the future. All right, let me tell you about today's podcast with Nadiya Nottingham. Nadiya and I go way back to the early New York days in the 90s. We talk about that some. You guys know I love to revisit those early formative years for me. And honestly, I've known Nadiya that long, but this is definitely the longest conversation we've ever had, even though I definitely consider her a friend. And as I said, we go way back. So it was great to really learn about my friend and to share in some really cool stuff. You guys have heard me talking about the magic and the mystery of life, and that's one of the reasons why I get so concerned when stuff gets too clinical. Well, I fleshed that out with Nadiya today, and we get into all kinds of very cool stuff. Excited for you to hear it today. Before we do, let me mention that this episode of Yoga Talks is sponsored by Karmasoft. And I'm betting there are a lot of you listening to this right now who are running studios and you're using Mind Body Online. I know, everybody does. And maybe at one time or another, you considered the possibility of switching to something else, but it seems like such a hassle. It seems like it's going to be so much anxiety, and you've already got so much on you. You're overloaded. I completely get it. But listen, I think you want to check out Karmasoft. And I'm saying that not just because they're a sponsor, but because I used Karmasoft for 10 years when I had a center. And I know the owner, Rudy Senecal. I knew him long before he was sponsoring the podcast. I recorded an episode with him. I encourage you to go back and listen to it. And I know firsthand that Karmasoft can make your job easier. So listen, do yourself a favor. Go check it out. Karmasoftonline.com. Also, maybe you've been listening and you've been connecting to some of the things that I've been talking about and you would like to meet me in person. If so, I do have a few upcoming gigs. I'm going to be in Fishkill, New York, November 10th. I'm going to be in Auckland, New Zealand, November 24th and 25th. Still a few spaces left there. I'm also going to be in London again at Tri Yoga Camden in January 11th through 13th. You can find out about those gigs and more, and you can find the archives of this podcast and my blog and my online video stuff. All of it is at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, I think that is about it. I'm going to touch base with you on the other side, and I'm going to tell you about next week's episode, which is a Yoga Alliance related episode. Ooh, I know. I will tell you more about it on the other side if you want to check in with me. But there's certainly some stuff to talk about. We will get into it next week. And like I said, I'll tell you more about it on the other side. For now, let's get to it. Let's listen to this talk that I had with Nadiya Nottingham.
Hello.
Hello, is this Nadiya?
Yes. Hi, Jay.
Hi.
Hi.
All right. I think we're good to go. Let me just check a thing. Say something so I can check a level.
Good morning, Jay. Lovely to hear you.
Yes. It's voice to voice in podcast land.
Yes. Wonderful.
Cool. How's it going for you today? Are you in New York City right now?
No, I'm in my house up in the country in Amenia, New York.
Oh, Amenia. Where's Amenia?
Amenia is right on the border of Connecticut and close to Great Barrington, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. I know.
Sort of where the three states come together.
Got you. I was just noticing, do you have any headphones that you might be able to use?
Jay, I'm sorry. My headphones don't work with this computer.
Okay, that's fine. I was just checking because sometimes it's even better, but I can hear you just fine, so it's not a worry. It'll be fine. I've recorded like this too. It won't be a problem.
Yeah, I bought a new iPhone and realized that the headphones don't work. I don't have the portable ones.
Oh, they have like only the wireless ones now, or you have to have like the little dongle. They don't like plug in anymore or whatever. It's crazy.
Yeah. So,
I'm telling you, I will not use the fingerprint thing on my phone.
Oh.
And I will not get one of those Alexa things or those Google Home things. I was like at a party the other day. I was talking to somebody, and it was kind of neat, but also kind of dystopian and scary. I was like talking to someone, and the music was a little bit loud.
Yes.
And he just all of a sudden turned and shouted, "Alexa, turn the music down." And it like went down a little. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in a science fiction movie.
I know. It's bizarre, all this stuff. Soon we'll be having these parts put into our bodies.
Oh God, it might be the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Well, Nadiya, this has been such a long time coming, this conversation.
Right.
For ever. I've been thinking that we should talk, and it just hasn't happened, but now it's happening now. So finally.
Yes. All good things in divine order.
Yes, indeed. And, you and I know each other from quite a while back. I know you from the very beginning days of the Breathing Project.
That's right. We were some of the original teachers there.
And, it's interesting to me, and I don't know if it's the best place to start, but maybe when I went to your you just sent me your updated bio. You don't say you're a yoga teacher in your bio.
Well, the beginning of my bio says I'm a 500-hour.
Oh, that's right. That updated one did say that. That's right.
Yeah,
you did mention that. But I mentioned that only because back then, weren't you teaching like a more straight yoga thing, or were you doing the same stuff back then too, and I just didn't know?
No, I was a good observation. I was teaching more straight up yoga, and my class at the Breathing Project was called Yoga for Bones, because I had been given a diagnosis of bone loss, and I had pretty severe cervical spine compression. And I just started a practice of my own. I was told by the doctor that diagnosed me that I might lose movement in my arms and hands because of the cervical compression. And he recommended surgery. And I said, no, I don't think so. So I started looking into my yoga practice, and I thought, well, if I'm having compression in my cervical spine, maybe I should stop doing headstand and shoulder.
Step one, eh? Step one.
So, kind of speaking to what you talk about, yogi, heal thyself, I just thought, well, Nadiya, you better change this up a bit. So I designed a practice for myself. I did some studies. I designed my own practice without inversions and compression on the cervical spine. And I also studied with somebody whose name I'd rather not mention now because I don't want to completely diss the work that she taught me, because a lot of it was very useful. But that person taught me that twisting and forward bends were not good for people with bone loss. Mm. And that was partly what I was teaching at the Breathing Project. But I also did a lot of core strengthening and standing poses as we were taught, well, at least at the teachings that I got through Leslie Kaminoff there at the Breathing Project, using more of a breath-centered standing practice with movement. So as I began to understand that the spine, like all of the body, as you know well, it needs to move in all the ways that we were designed to move. So if you never twist your body and you never bend forward, you're going to become stiff, and you're not going to ever be able to twist and bend forward. So
what does Amy say? The full range of movement possibility, right?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So that's...
I was going to jump in for a second. I was curious before we get back to that, because we'll get back to that. That's an important idea, which I completely agree with.
Yes.
I'm curious. What was your practice before the diagnosis?
Well, I'm a trained integral yoga teacher, but I was also doing Ashtanga yoga back then.
Everybody was.
Yeah. So
at least I was. I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of us were.
Yeah, because I thought, I was taught this more gentle yoga with breathing and chanting, and no, I want to do that crazy stuff. I want to do. Oh, sorry, no offense to any Ashtanga yoga.
No. I mean, I know what you mean, because it was a cool scene that came about in New York City. It was like the Ashtanga people it kind of hit, and it was a really enticing, cool, interesting scene, and there was really amazing kind of practice happening there. But there was also some other crappy shit happening too.
Yeah, exactly.
That we learn more about every day.
Yes, and I had gone to India with integral yoga as part of my training with Swami Ashokananda, and we were invited to Pattabhi Jois's Yogashala to watch him in action, teaching his students and his trainees. And I was just so impressed by how the way they could work and move their bodies. And, then I was 30-something. Now I'm 60. And I just wanted to do that stuff, So...
Was that trip to India also when you got exposed to QiGong? I read that somewhere, that you had a teacher while you were in India. Was that the same trip?
Actually, yes. That was one of the trainers there was Dr. Durga O'Sullivan. She's an American acupuncturist, and she gave us these QiGong warm-ups, the shaking of the body and the hand palming and self-massage. So that was my first introduction to Qigong, but I wasn't studying it officially then, but she introduced me to it.
Well, we'll get back to Qigong, because I have questions about Qigong. I'm curious to ask you about it. But I want to go back to Yoga for Bones again, where we were, because I think that's very interesting that you were teaching that. I remember now that you taught that Yoga for Bones class. And that whole, it's interesting, you get a diagnosis, and doctors... we just went through this whole thing with me and my wife. We hadn't been to doctors for a long time, and then we decided, we're getting older, we should go get our checkups and everything. And it was just such a shit show. It was such a shit show, and the insurance doesn't cover everything the same in Pennsylvania, so they run tests and then you have to pay for them. It's really fucked up, and I feel like they put a lot of fear into you. Yes. Rather than help a healing process or help you feel like a way out of it or something, they put you in a hole or something. Yeah. And so then to find a way to address that with yoga, and that's a pretty common thing sometimes, where to address a certain thing means don't do this and don't do that.
Yes, exactly.
And I learned, like you did, that I think if there's an occasion to like be protective, if someone has pain, like there might be a good reason to keep some axial extension going, but not forever, for always. Or you're going to hurt yourself. I think, as we've learned, that we want to be able to move in the capacity we can and encourage movement, not like restrict movement, right? You were talking about the spine.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think in fairness to doctors, I have some wonderful doctors who are more integrated with a sort of a holistic view of prevention. But that was back in the 90s that I got that diagnosis, and that person, of course, if you go to a surgeon, surgeons do surgery. So you have to remember that. If you go to someone who normally does surgery, they're going to recommend surgery, usually.
That's right. That's their business.
Yeah.
But, I also read something about you in your in the bio somewhere that you had like a lung collapse after a crazy stint in the 80s of being a crazy partier. Is that right? Yes. So now... So how did that happen? How did your lung collapse?
Well, I started smoking I'm not proud of this fact, when I was about 14. And, in Ireland back then, we were all these little rebels, and smoking cigarettes, non-tipped, unfiltered cigarettes. And of course, I grew up in a culture of alcohol consumption. And, we were all drinking and partying. And then I came to live in New York in the 1980s, in 1982 to be precise. And I was in the fashion business. I was a professional makeup artist, which was a wonderful job. It actually was a kind of a pre-training to working with people personally, one-on-one, because I was so close to people.
I mean, wait, you were a fashion artist in the 80s? Are we talking like shoulder pads and stuff?
Oh, yes. I had the shoulder pads.
Oh, my God.
The hairspray, the whole thing. Yeah. It was and,
because that's a very particular time to be in the fashion industry, is all I'm saying.
Cafeteria, Andy Warhol area. We were, all that stuff. Yeah. And, we were doing all kinds of illicit stuff, and I was smoking and drinking like crazy. And I woke up one morning after being out I was out most of the night. I woke up the next morning, and I had this horrendous pain in my chest, my left side. And I thought, oh my God, I wonder if I'm having a heart attack. But I went to work anyway. And, that was the crazy time it was. And about halfway through the day, I could barely move. And I left work and I went to the hospital, and I had an X-ray. And the guy walked out of the X-ray room, the radiologist, and he said, "I can't believe you're sitting there." He said, "Your left lung is totally collapsed." So I was brought to Cabrini Medical Center, which I think may be closed now. It was on 19th Street. And when I went into that ward where they had to re-inflate my lung, and in those days they used to put a tube inside your lung to drain the fluid that goes into your lung when it collapses. I'm not sure if they still do that, but anyway, I was pretty incapacitated, feeling absolutely terrible. And I discovered that across the hall from me in Cabrini, which was where they treated AIDS patients at that time, one of my good friends was dying of AIDS, Gordon. And I was able to get out of bed after 2 days and wheel the thing that was attached to my lung, on one of those stand-up wheelie things. And I went across to his room, and he had been, a robust-looking man, very handsome, and he was this tiny, shriveled being, just days away from dying. And we had a beautiful conversation, and, I kissed him goodbye. And I went back to my bed and I said, Nadiya, you are so fucking crazy. You are really just ruining your life. And a couple of days later, or maybe it was that same night, my sister came to visit me. She'd been living here with me from Dublin as well. And she said, Nadiya, I just went to a yoga class today, and the people were so peaceful and wonderful there. It was at this place, Integral Yoga. And I just said, oh my God, that's what I need to do. I'm going to give up smoking, give up drinking, stop partying, and go to yoga.
Get thee to the yoga center, eh?
Exactly. So, it was an extraordinary confluence of events to see my friend dying and to realize that I was killing myself on purpose. And he was not like many other people in the 80s before the drugs, the protease inhibitors and all that. So he didn't have a chance, but I had the opportunity to rebuild my life. And that's what I did. As soon as I left hospital, I departed from a person I was living with. I stopped drinking, stopped smoking, stopped doing all the drugs and carrying on. I stayed in the fashion business for several years, but then after I'd been practicing yoga for 3 or 4 years, I trained at Integral to become a teacher.
And your lung got better.
My lung got better, and actually the last x-ray I had, which was quite a few years ago now, my left lung is actually in better shape than my right lung.
Maybe because your right lung had to pull some weight for a while, right?
Actually, that's probably true, yeah.
Yeah, wow. Well, okay, so and then now by that time it's still the 80s. What was it the 80s? No, it was 90s. Was it already the 90s when you started? When did you do that training?
Yeah, that was in the 90s, and I did my first teacher training in 96 at Integral.
See, I've just been talking about that period of time from like 92 to 99. That was like a kind of golden time in my mind in the yoga scene in Manhattan. There was so much going on, and like
yes,
and you could get training, and there was like people paying for class, like private students, and like I made more money at that time in a way. It was there wasn't a lot of yoga teachers yet. It wasn't big business yet.
That's right. That's exactly right. The 90s was. I also as soon as I finished my training, one of my friend said, "Oh well, as soon as you graduate, I want you to start teaching me." So I was her student, and then she recommended me to someone else, and within 6 months, I had like 15 private students that I was going to their houses every week.
I remember at one point there was like a Vogue magazine that came out, and it was like the top 10 hip things for this year, and one of them was having a private yoga instructor. I was like getting calls, just random phone calls from people looking for private yoga lessons. I mean, it was a crazy time. Yeah. And then, what's interesting to me also, going back to Yoga for Bones and the Breathing Project, is the Breathing Project did seem to be kind of a magnet for people who were going against the grain. So even though you don't necessarily agree with this concept you were working with at that time, there was nobody telling people to be careful. You know what I mean? Like people who were in the Desikachar world who were like adapting practice to individual needs more and not pushing so hard, like me, and people like you who were not. Interesting enough that you had been doing some crazy stuff, but then like me, at some point your practice had to change, right?
Had to change, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And back then there was no like William J. Broad articles or anything. We were just like this little ragtag haters or something. You know what I mean? Pushing back against what was like the booming popular thing, saying, hey, maybe we need to slow down, you guys. And nobody was slowing down.
That's right. And actually, even though some of the things that I was teaching then I wouldn't necessarily recommend now. But most of what I was teaching was absolutely healthful for people with, especially if people are prone to fracture. And there where I had students come to my class who'd had their ribs cracked by a teacher adjusting them, and I even heard of someone who had gone to a class where her breastbone was broken by a teacher pressing on her breastbone, so there.
Yeah, I really felt like that's why I was at the Breathing Project, because it felt like people who were seeing the same things I was seeing. Like I wrote the first thing I ever wrote was called Notes from a Concerned Practitioner and Teacher. Because I just felt like I had learned all this stuff and some of it had hurt me.
Yes.
And I was just like, I don't know if this is all good. I don't know if this is right for everybody. It might be right for some people, but I don't know if it's right for everybody.
Yeah.
And maybe the problem isn't that the people aren't good at it. It's that we're trying to teach people things that aren't appropriate.
That's right.
And so I don't know. I was like, I didn't know a lot of people who were saying those sorts of things, and the crew there at Breathing Project were people who were asking those kinds of questions, which is sort of interesting because that kind of became their slogan at the Breathing Project, right? Yes. Asking questions,
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
All right. So when do you go from yoga from bones to like being a QiGong teacher? Or what comes next? Because I know you do shaman. Like, what comes next? Because you have a couple things in your bio. So, where does it go for you after yoga for bones? Where did you go as a teacher?
Well, if I could go back a little bit to my own beginnings as a human being, with that.
Please. That's where your yoga goes.
Yes. I grew up in Ireland and I went to a convent school, which was, quite a strict school where all girls, where we wore these woolly, scratchy uniforms and were taught by nuns. And it was painfully, it felt like prison to me. And even though it wasn't cruel, there was no real cruelty except for getting hit on the knuckles with the ruler. But I think that happened to a lot of people.
That's pretty cruel. I never got hit on the hand with the ruler before, so...
Yes. Back in the, the 60s and the 70s, that was considered okay.
Right.
But my school was right on the ocean, and it was a beautiful setting. And I just remember when I felt my most crazed or sort of pent up with being in this place, wearing this horrible uniform, I would look out at the ocean and the seagulls and see the water crashing on the waves crashing on the rocks, and I would just breathe. And so that was my way of, it was like I taught myself to meditate. I didn't realize what I was doing, but that was how I tuned out the indoctrination that I was getting in the school. And so during my time at the Breathing Project, fasting forward to there.
Well, wait a second. I want to say something about Ireland because I've never been there.
Oh, yeah.
But I read this book. I don't know that you would know this because it's called The Kingdom of Shiva's Irons. And it's actually like a golf book. Like I was really into golf for a while.
Oh.
It's about somebody golfing in Ireland. But it's all about mysticism and the natural world. And I don't know, it made me think of you. It's an interesting book. It's a weird mix of like mysticism and maybe even druidry and then like yoga and golf.
That's funny.
Yeah. But I've always had like a feeling that I've heard people say that too, that when they go to Ireland, that like the land, it's one of those places where the land has like a resonance to it.
Yes, it really does. And once you've experienced that, it doesn't leave you. So I say to people when they go to Ireland, Dublin is a great town. I'm from Dublin. I love it. But go to the ancient sites and experience the fact that people, Ireland built these extraordinary stone circles that are older than Stonehenge or older than the pyramids, many of them. So the people of Ireland are really from way, 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 way back before many, many other cultures. So there is something in the land there. And what we say about the fairies is that the original people of Ireland were running away from their enemies, and they turned into fairies so they could disappear. But they're still there.
Yes, I was in the UK with my friend Theo Wildcraft, and she took me to some stone circles. She's going to be mad at me because I can't remember the name, but it's not Stonehenge, it's the one near Stonehenge. But
okay.
There is a thing when you go and there's these huge stones and you could feel it. You could feel it when you're there, you know.
It is extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. So we're back at the breathing project.
So yes, fast forwarding there, that when I was at the breathing project, Leslie actually introduced me to my boyfriend at the time, Michael Brownstein, and Michael was practicing Qigong, and he took me to some Qigong classes. And so I was like, oh, yes, Qigong. And so I started, I moved back into Qigong, and I loved this form that we were practicing together with this other group of people that he introduced me to. And out of that, I traveled to Seattle to where the original teachers of that form were living and teaching in a school there. And so I went back and forth to the West Coast for several years to study with them and become certified to teach this form that I fell in love with. And that's how I started. I loved the idea of palming, the rubbing of the hands together, self-massage, which in Qigong is considered a necessary precursor to any practice, especially meditation, because our organs and our skin need our personal healing. And you talk about yogi heal thyself, or I forget the term you exactly used.
Yeah, that recent blog post, I know what you're talking about, yes.
Yeah, that I'm more and more realizing that we need to heal ourselves, and I need to heal myself. And that is a continuing practice, because I'm a different woman than I was 5 years ago, and I'm certainly a different woman than I was 30 years ago. So, pathologies come up, or a different state of mind. I have to do a self-healing and check in with myself every morning in order for that to be, for my own practice to be authentic. I
couldn't agree more. I think I sometimes feel like that is kind of your job. A teacher is like, you have to have a practice from which to teach from. And that practice involves you tending to you in the same way that you're trying to teach other people to tend to themselves. Exactly. So you have to walk it. You got to do it.
Yes.
And you know what else is interesting to me about palming? I found my way to that too. And it was almost like I used to start every class I taught with Kapalabhati breathing. Mm-hmm. And at one point, I just decided that was too aggressive a note to start a practice on. Like it was such a purgative thing to be doing to begin. Right. And I replaced it with just rubbing my hands together and then like rubbing my face and my neck. Just like gentle caressing, not like deep tissue massage,
No, that's right.
And it was just like, to me, it was almost like this symbol representation of this change where I'm not going to do purgative things with my body as though it's impure. I just want to love it. I just want to care for myself,
That's lovely. That's very sweet.
But it's funny, just giving yourself a rub,
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're always saying, oh, I need a massage. I mean, or you hear people say that, and it was like, well, you can do it yourself. It's not the same as going to somebody else, but it may, in fact, be equally healing, even though it's not a deep tissue, because it's not meant to be deep tissue. It's meant to be exactly as you just said.
Well, it's also, I think, isn't that like an Ayurveda thing where you like rub yourself with oil?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. I haven't ever done that, but maybe I should start.
Yeah, well, I think even in the morning, if you put body lotion on, you can do it.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.